Hello?
Would you like to hear a movie film review, Tara?
So Scream is back in 2021 with the 5th entry, and of course it's called Scream instead of Scream 5, or Scream with a 5 instead of an S, which we all know would have been unreal. It's been 25 years after the first set of brutal killings that spooked the town of Woodsboro, and now a new killer has donned the Ghostface mask and begins to target a group of teenagers who all seem to have a connection to the town's shady past. So basically, Ghostface is back about the place and ready to dusht some people. But sadly, both Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson haven't returned for the sequel, mostly because Wes Craven is #dusht, may he rest in peace, and Williamson was probably busy with other projects. So this new film has been helmed by Matt Olpin and Tyler Gillett, the duo behind the brilliant 2019 film Ready or Not. But does this duo manage to keep their overall high quality of the Scream series intact, or do they hack this slasher franchise to pieces with this latest entry? Well, let's start off with what I thought was good in this film. Scream is kind of known for its interesting opening scenes, and this film is no different. I felt the opening was a great tension building scene, and a nice callback to the original, and it also gets bonus points for taking the piss out of elevated horror like the Babadook. It's probably one of the standout scenes in the film, and while feeling familiar, does enough to stand out on its own. And while sticking with the overall tone and vibe of the film, I feel that the directors managed to keep it consistent with the previous 4 films that Wes Craven directed. It doesn't feel out of place when compared to the other 4, and wouldn't feel weird if doing a full rewatch of the series. Also, the meta commentary, while feeling a little bit forced in this one, does still allow the film to stand out and not just become a straightforward slasher film. This film is more about requels and toxic fandoms, which probably was the best thing they could comment about in 2022. Although, I wish the killer's motivation was that they wanted to get a Snyder cut of a Stab movie. That would have been amazing commentary on toxic fandoms. They get a lot of mileage out of it, and with the nature of requels, there is a lot of callbacks to the previous films for fans to enjoy. But one connection that I won't spoil here, while I did find interesting, is kind of silly the more you think about it. You'll see what I mean. And speaking of callbacks, David Arquette does a great job in this as Dewey, especially out of the 3 returning legacy characters. His story is the most interesting in the film, and he is the most heavily involved of the 3, and is the only one who appears to be trying to give this something new. I'd nearly have been happy with Dewey having been the only legacy character to return, but we needed the whole cast here, and that's what we got. With all that said, let's move on to the negatives. Let's get the nitpick out of the way. While they do make fun of the fact that the film has the same title as the first one, it's still getting very annoying to call these requels by the same title as the original. Like, it's going to get confusing and everyone just adds on the date at the end anyway, like with Halloween 2018. I know it's a nitpick and an in-joke, but Scream 5 would have done the job. Speaking of Halloween, this film suffers from Halloween 2 syndrome, where there are scenes set in a hospital, which is a creepy setting for some people, but what makes this kind of silly is that in a whole hospital, there's only like 2 people in it the entire time. I don't know what hospitals are like stateside, but there's always a ton of people around them here, even at night. I know with horror you have to sometimes check your brain at the door, but this is a silly trope that needs to stop. Another horror trope in this is the cast of characters and their intelligence being all over the shop. At some points, they make great smart decisions, but then 5 minutes later they make a really stupid decision that ends up getting them attacked. It's really annoying that in 2021 we can't get actual smart characters that don't suddenly have a brain fart when it's time for their death scene. And in terms of the new characters, Marissa Barrera as Sam and Jack Quaid as Richie are probably the standouts and anchor the film, but the rest are kind of throwaways. I honestly can't remember if one of them died or not, and I only just seen this film. That's how much character development some of them get. And while I enjoy David Arquette in it, I can't say the same for Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers. She has a laughably bad introduction scene and kind of just feels shoehorned in there much more than Dewey did. Similarly with Neve Campbell as Sydney. She does a better job than Cox, but also kind of feels thrown into this film and is there just to get the legacy characters into the film so they can talk about the meta commentary on requels that are all the rage now. This film also has way too much scares or tension building scenes that involve someone opening a door or a fridge and having you think that someone is going to be behind it. It is used in one scene to great effect, but it keeps happening afterwards and just becomes annoying and you just want them to get to the killing. And speaking of the killings, while some of them are good, most of them are just a spot of stabbing. Nothing creative here. There is one great kill, but most of these kills in the film are just Ghostface stabbing down at someone and then pushing the knife down with his other hand. It just keeps feeling like it's the same thing happening over and over again, which is a real shame because you're crying out for something creative to happen. You want your kills in a slasher to be memorable and stand out, but none of them truly do, which is a huge shame. The gore in the film is fine, but it's nothing to write home about, and Twitter was hyping the crap out of this. Lads, you need to tone down these first reactions. It's becoming a joke. After 5 of these films, it just doesn't feel like we were getting anything new with them. Yes, we get some new meta commentary on the current state of films and horror, but we don't really get much new story beats. A lot of this kind of felt similar to Scream 4 to me, and going into these films you can kind of know what the killer's reason will be, and that there probably will be multiple killers. This could have been one to mix it up a bit, but with the meta commentary they were going for, it kind of forces them to do callbacks and stick very close to the original. And with this film you can kind of figure out who is going to be the killer or killers pretty quickly, which is a huge shame, and they really try hard to keep you guessing in the film, but ultimately it's very easy to figure out. And the third act, while fun, does have reveals that are kind of stupid, and you really have to suspend your disbelief when thinking back to some of the stuff Ghostface did in the film. And honestly, the reasons behind the killings kind of reminded me of the first Scary Movie at times. So while not the best Scream sequel of all time, it is still a pretty enjoyable slasher film that you just wish was a bit smarter and more creative than it is. I enjoyed it more than Scream 4, but would probably put it behind Scream 3 or maybe just on par with it. Maybe on a rewatch I might put it a bit higher, I don't know, I'll have to find out. So I give Scream 6 out of 10 Horshes. So what do you think of Scream 2022? Did you enjoy it, hate it, or just feel like it was a bit meh overall? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you haven't already, throw us a like and a sub, and check out some of the other videos on screen now, and I'll see you next time when we horsh into another movie film.